Good morning. My name is Amol Nirgudkar. I'm the CEO of Prism, and we are here this morning with another webinar during this COVID epidemic series, and we're doing a lot of these every single day to provide resources to our clients about what's happening, what they can do, what options they have with HR, with taxes, with teams, and then today we have Kristine Berry, who is an incredible consultant and a coach to dental practices nationwide. She is a registered dental hygienist by trade and then got her master's later on and really helps now build great teams for practices that are emerging, that are growing from 1 to 2 to 4 to 10, and put those processes in place. So the topic today, really, we invited you because we were excited about the ebook that we've collaborated with you on, which is going to be available after this, along with this webinar. But talk about the importance of remote teams and what can we do remotely, not only during this crisis, because we need to figure this out right now, as we have nobody coming to our offices right now, but also in the future of what it is. And I've read some amazing articles by you about implementing this effectively in dental offices. So without any more introduction than that, I'm going to let you talk about this stuff. Tell us a little bit more about what you've done in this space and what you do currently.
Oh, well, thank you very much for inviting me. This is a wonderful opportunity to have a meaningful conversation within this pandemic times and with what everyone is going through. And I want to acknowledge those of you who are listening that this is a time of identifying emotions and who we are going to be now, and then who we are going to be after this. So from a remote standpoint, it's really, in fact, I don't think I shared this before with you, that I was actually a remote employee back in the early 90s. And that was when I was in a sales role within dentistry. So remote and virtual positions have been on the peripheral of dentistry for a long time. And organizations like the Gallup organizations, a lot of you are familiar with the Strength Finders, they've been studying the remote workforce and have identified best practices over the past 10 years. So there's a body of knowledge that's there. Over the past couple of weeks, now it's been thrown into dentistry, right? Let's identify it, let's peel it back, let's relate it to one of the best practices that we can do in our current situation in these pandemic times. So thank you again for having this conversation. And it's a beautiful way to identify how we can connect with our teams now, whether you are open to see emergencies or not, and then what we need to put into place from a structural standpoint after this. Whatever the new normal is going to look like, there are ways that we can, ways of working that we can identify, we can incorporate now, so we can, hit the ground running when we know that our stores are open and schedules may be a little bit on the crazy side in a few months. Let's hope.
Dentists today all over the country, whether you're a DSO or an individual practice, are trying to really figure out what to do. There's a lot of free time available today because obviously we're not seeing patients. So some of them are doing the teledentistry option, and it's still not widely adopted, but that's happening. But how do you? It's a mindset, right? At the end of the day, I read in one of your articles was it's a mind shift, the remote mindset. So how do you get it if you're a dentist today? How do you get started in that shift during this time? But that shift hopefully stays again after this time is over. How do you get this going?
So from a dentist standpoint, you may have, so think back that you may have already had some conversations with your team members, right? So you may already be working remotely. If you have any type of offsite person who does perhaps consulting like myself, or marketing, or accounts receivable, which everyone should be, from a cash flow perspective. So you probably have those aspects with it as well. So we have contract employees, and then we have W-2 or employees for your practices. So looking forward at, your team leader or your office manager, right? And that could be from a situational standpoint, as well as from a generational standpoint, right? From a generational standpoint, a lot of team members would prefer or have that preference of working remotely at least a couple of days a week. And what I want to clarify, setting the context, please hear me when I say this does not mean that they have less accountability, less responsibility, they're not going to hit their performance goals. In fact, that's the opposite. When you have this type of flexibility with a workforce and with an employee who wants it, they're actually more productive. and they're hitting their goals more because you are identifying the best ways that they work. So just kind of setting that context, if anyone has any type of fears around it, that's not actually what we're finding in the research. So specifically from a leader standpoint, and a leader I'll identify as anyone who manages people, whether, you know, from you have an employees. So from that perspective, it comes back to you need a plan, right? You need to identify and have conversations with who perhaps would want to be going remote, because not everyone's going to want to go remote, especially after this experience. Sometimes we think, oh, everyone's not going to want to go back to the workforce. There's a lot of social aspects of it that we can touch base later with isolation and those type of behavioral and human relationships that some people may not want to continue to deal with all the time.
Sure.
So you want to look at who can be. So from a teledentistry standpoint, how you may want to structure that, and that could be a different type of component from your business model and or administrative team members. And then again, if you're having something going out into the community for collaboration with the medical providers outside of this pandemic, that is another business model that you could have for clinical people who are working in other settings, but they're still under your supervision. So looking at where that business plan may look for you, and if it is a fit. And then I do want to go back to culture. Is it a fit for your culture? Is it a fit for your vision? Is it a fit for your mission, right? And this is a great opportunity. You said that a lot of us have some time on our hands. Going back to, have you looked at your vision and mission for your dental practice lately? You know, what does that say? Is that going to be the same it is now that it will be in a few weeks from now? Will you have the same team members, right? You during this pandemic and with this fear and the loss that people are experiencing, your team may look different. And so what can you do now, even if you may not pursue it later on, but what can you do now that your team is remote to have that connection and continue that connection with them? So that's other things that we can touch base on as well. So it's immediate as well as future thing. And then obviously, so it won't be a fit for, which is perfectly okay.
So you're saying is that we need to identify what can be done remotely. Obviously, dentistry cannot be done remotely, as we know that, obviously. But there is a lot of
not yet.
Not yet. I know.
You know, with robotics, you never
get a robot right there, and you're right there. But identifying things that could be done remotely.
Yes.
I guess that would be the first thing. Talking to your team members about, hey, are you open to this? But I think many are. It gives them the flexibility of kind of taking care of their lives while they're taking money.
Yes.
And then I guess what would the next step be? So once you identify, okay, here's what we can do. Billing. Okay, we can do billing remotely. AR collections and stuff like that can be done remotely. Insurance verification could be done remotely. There's a lot of things, right, that could be done. But even sometimes team meetings, right? You talk about tools that you can use. What tools have you seen being used for effective communication, remote tools? Do people use Zoom, or what have you seen?
No, absolutely. In fact, Zoom has been, so the technology from a team perspective and from a meetings perspective, you definitely can have and identifying, I mean, this is a great way to connect with someone on a remote aspect. And it has a lot to do with, because the talent pool, right? You may need to reach outside your geographical area to have the best talent. As well as if you're looking at a metropolitan area like LA, it can take you 2 hours to get from point A to point B. So even though the geographic location may not necessarily be across the world, it could be from one end of a city to another, or one end of a state to another. So definitely have that type of ability and kind of think about where you want to go and where you want to grow your business. From a platform standpoint, it's going back to the process. So how are we going to set up the process? So we need to make sure, and this is whether or not you're introducing an intraoral camera or going paperless, right? That technology, we need to take a step back to make sure we have the time to train people and they know exactly how to utilize it, because that has to do with isolation. So isolation is different than being alone, right? You can be alone if you don't have any connection with your team members, if you're in a brick and mortar office, versus isolation remotely is they don't know how to identify the technology. And a lot of times they may not feel safe to ask, or they think they should know how to use this, right? So especially again, from the cross-generational, this is an amazing opportunity for, and I'm going to say I have 5 young adults in their 20s that they are teaching me, they're mentoring up, right? So they're mentoring me on this technology and I can mentor them on other things, right? So we need to make sure reach your team members who knows about the applications that you can use on your phone, who can do a little tutorial about how to get on Zoom, and establish norms. Norms are really important. From, yes, you need your camera on, right? So this is not, and we hear some of the newscasters on TV now, and they're joking that they're all business from here up and they have their pajamas down.
Yeah.
That can be an agreement that you're having, right? Exactly. I'm comfortable too, but have those agreements. Yes, you're going to have your webcam on. Yes, you're going to look presentable. Yes, you're going to try to, quiet any type of distance if you can. Yes, you're going to have some good lighting, right? So you can kind of set them up for success that way. And some of these aspects of it, they may need a laptop. We found this out with school children right now. We can't make the assumption that our team members at home have a computer and somewhere to access it. So that's going to be looking into your business model and what you have to invest. It could be basic laptops, webcams, even a desk, or some type of thing that you can have your team be able to connect in a comfortable environment.
So what you're saying to me is that we really need to obviously make this thing available, but we've got to set up a clear set of expectations, right? Because it can be just, oh, let's just get on Zoom every morning and do whatever we're doing. It's got to be, because obviously you talk a lot about accountability
Yes.
right? And we've got to, and sometimes when there's no personal touch and when we don't look people in the eye, obviously I can look in your eyes right now, but the beauty of a warm handshake and in the body language. So we've got to figure out a way, I'm sure, to set up expectations, set up accountability
Yes.
during this process. And it cannot be just ad hoc.
Right.
And like, oh, we got to probably set up a set of standard protocols. We're going to use this, we're going to do this. This is what we're going to accomplish. So what do you think about that in terms of establishing accountability and process?
Yeah, it's at this point in time with the remote workforce or after this pandemic, it's all of us, and I'll throw myself in because there's a learning edges for me as well. I continue to learn through this process, is double down on intentionality and accountability. This is what we really need to focus on. So specifically, let's pull out your job descriptions, right? You can establish, let me take a step back. So let's talk about the virtual meetings again. Have you set up virtual meetings with your teams? Are you jumping on the phone on a Zoom? Does everyone have access to Zoom? Are you doing it at least once a week, if not twice a week? Are you deciding every day at 11 o'clock from 11 to 11:30, we're getting together and you're having that connection? Because if you have high performers and if you're not connecting with them, that fear that they may be having they may be looking for other options, right? You want to be able to virtually have your arms around your team to let them know that you may not have all the answers, because we don't, it's changing. However, we're in this together. So that is going to be very important. And I want to challenge those too, that looking forward into your schedule 2 months from now, 6 months from now, make sure you're putting those team meetings in your schedules now. And you have to boundary them. If you've never had morning huddles, establish them. Put them in now. Have those type of agreements. So you're moving forward because you know patients are going to be calling, and you need to have that accountability, intentionality to continue this on when we're back to the new normal. So identify with your team, and texting is great. A lot of my offices are having group texts, or they have the WhatsApp, or they have Telegram, which is other applications on your mobile devices. However, make sure that you are connecting with them some type of visually, whether it's a FaceTime, whether it's individually or collectively, because that's really what's going to get that connection. And so you want to make sure you're doing that. And then what can you do, right? So the first thing that you may want to think about is we need to slow down to speed up. So those of you who are uncomfortable with more of the emotional intelligence or those building of those skills, just take a pause and say, hey, what's out your window, right? And then popcorn around the room and say everyone can share what's out their window. Or pick something that's meaningful on your desk and give everyone 30 seconds or 45 seconds to talk about that, right? So the relationship building in the beginning of a virtual meeting, at the end of a virtual meeting, is really key to make sure when you're leaving that, because we've all been here, right? We hang up and it's silence. right?
Right.
So what type of energy that we need to have so that person can now jump on and do those reports, make those phone calls for reactivation, or do the insurance claims, or whatever their specific tasks will be. So there's a lot of things that you can do now virtually from a structural and a business standpoint, as well as a relationship standpoint. And where I was going with the job descriptions, and let me just finish that thought, was when was the last time you looked at your job description? When was the last time your team members looked at the job descriptions? And something that can be very easily done is that can be emailed to everyone, or you can have a shared Google Doc. And all right, today, I'm going to give you guys 48 hours and let's jump on, on Monday and let's review everyone's job descriptions. Have
Sure.
them go through it. Highlight what they do and they're really good at. Highlight, I don't even know what this is. I don't even know why this got on here. And then highlight what they need additional training for. So just that in itself can give you a wealth of information to set up some training modules for your team while they need it. And specifically, one of my offices, it was unique, was that their job descriptions, they were already paperless. But the languaging in their job description was like the paper chart, pull the chart, do this. So even those nuances can be cleaned up during this time.
So this is what you're telling us is what we do now, right? To use this time.
Yes. Yep.
But as we set up some expectations, I mean, maybe our job descriptions also would change a little bit
Mm-hmm.
to incorporate some remote aspects of the work. Because if a hygienist can come in at 10 o'clock and let's say he doesn't have patients in the morning, and spends 8 to 10 in the morning remotely
Mm-hmm.
calling on patients. Uh,
Yes.
that
Yes.
that could be that could accomplish when, because
Yes.
if they're missing the rush hour traffic and basically coming in at 10:30 and could do that stuff. So you could really deploy a whole host of things. Like, okay, we're going to employ remote teams and we're going to figure out each job,
Mm-hmm.
um, and what they can do effectively,
Yes.
in an accountable fashion on
Mm-hmm.
a remote basis. And maybe this is the time to do it, right? Maybe this is the time to plan around this, because I think you're right. I think people who work from home, as long as there is the right structure and process in place, they're more productive. My people right now are all remote and they've been more productive than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
The talent pool is completely now expanded to the best in the industry. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Training, I think, can be done very effectively through remote teams. But I agree with you. I think um, if we set up some of these expectations now, put processes in place now, we can not only connect with each other during this time, because the connection is important. You don't want to just, okay, see your people in like 5 weeks.
Right.
You want to have that connection and work on your stuff,
Yeah.
and technology allows
Absolutely.
you to do that. What are the common mistakes people make when they kind of go into this process of okay, I'm going to do remote teams, but I mean, I'm sure there is, it's without a process, you're going to fail.
Right. Right. So two key aspects, and this could be again from a learning edge perspective, and going back to setting up expectations, setting up performance goals. So using your example of if we do have a hygienist and or administrative person who would be from 7 a.m. to 10 doing reactivation calls and then coming in and seeing their patient at 11, right? So you're structuring that way. But let's go back to that little area right there. Does your remote team member have the ability to, and this, I am not a cybersecurity person for HIPAA, but is there those access that they can remote in? Is that done in a safe way, right? So touch base with your IT people, making sure that that's safe versus using their own personal phones, right?
Right.
That is not something that we want to, I don't want to encourage. So we need to have that, again, going back to the budget and investment. So making sure they have the equipment
Right.
to handle that type of, from a HIPAA standpoint, confidentiality standpoint. And
Sure.
then say, do they have they been trained? Do they have the scripts? Do they have the languaging? Do they have the verbal skills? Perhaps their manager will be listening to some of their phone calls to help mentor them and coach them in the minute. And then setting the expectations. You have 2 hours. How many phone calls do you think you can get done? Let's set a goal, right? Because that varies. And then after, when that employee comes into the office, then have that 10-minute conversation from a debrief. What did you get done? How many phone calls? What was successful? How much did you schedule, right? Where did you schedule? What type of follow-up? So have that type of accountability. Don't just make the assumption that I'm going to tell them to do something or give them to do something and then never follow up, never close the loop on it, because that's when, accountability falls through. And if you're mismanaging expectations, right? The implicit right now has to be explicit. Communication has to be at its highest during the times of pandemic, but also for remote team members. We cannot assume that anything, that person knows how to do this, what is expected, or even knows how to follow up with someone. So all that really has to be peeled back. And when it's done, it can be done, it's really exciting. It can be done quite well. So I think I kind of bundled that in a little bit as far as the not having a communication plan, not building the safety and the trust with your team, identifying the ways of working and write it out. What type of team agreements? Right now, you can probably, any CEO or dentist or a team member listening to this can probably name their top 3 frustrations with their practice prior to this, right? So if you have a frustration or any type of hiccup or resistance, it's probably because there's a missing or a lack of an agreement. And that means a conversation and setting, who's going to do something, who's going to do what, and then by the by when and the deadline. And those 3 agreements really help to keep things clean. So that's what the failure is if you don't have those agreements in place.
This is exactly why you need a coach, because it's hard to do this yourself.
Absolutely. Yes.
Don't try this at home. I say to everybody, that's the reason why coaches are essential in your life, personal or professional, because they give you a structure. Because without a structure, it's like weight loss, right? If there is no structure around weight loss, I'm just going to eat less. That doesn't really work, right? You've got to have some structure. Either you're measuring calories or you're walking 10,000 steps. If you don't put a structure around whatever you're trying to accomplish, you're just going to make a goal and there's going to be no action. Right. And a lot of times we see in healthcare is all of the, especially clinic and the clinical side, they are so interested in gaining knowledge and accumulating the facts. And because that's what they are, dentists, they're fact finders. They love to get everything together. But when it comes to implementation, it kind of falters a little bit because you get busy. Yes. And whatever doesn't get measured, right? You got to measure, you got to put process in place, and you can effectively manage it. Otherwise, it just falls apart. You feel when Kristine came into your office, gave you a nice talk, put all the stuff in place. But then if you don't implement that, if you don't have a playbook, and I think that's one of the things you help do, right? Is kind of prepare that playbook for your office so that you can follow this, set a clear expectations, and then actually accomplish what you're trying to accomplish in a measurable way. Yes. No, it's fascinating. What tips, right now, obviously we are crisis times and people are very stressed about all this stuff. What tips, do you have any tips that they can do now that they can just all right, I'm gonna do these 3 things this week or next week, try to figure out what I can do with my team members who are sitting home, many without pay, to keep their spirits high, or to kind of get them to do planning around, hey, how are we going to open up and then take and be ready for the big wave of patients that's going to come in. Right. What tips do you have that dentists can do starting today or this week to kind of get their teams aligned remotely?
Right. Yeah, there's so much. So I would love to encourage everyone to be compassionate with themselves, right? We dentists and CEOs, we don't have a playbook for this, right? We are doing the best that we can. So I want you to just have that compassion and that calm for yourself, because things are changing. And so when you can identify that for yourself, then you're more likely to be able to have that type of calm and compassion for team members and eventually patients. So my first recommendation is to, if you have not dived into anything around emotional intelligence or or soft skills, or like I mentioned, there's a great book from Marshall Goldsmith what got you here won't get you there, right? Let's feed our mindset. Let's feed our mind so we can have meaningful conversations when we get back. So this is a time to really go within and identify where you need some support with. And then get together with a plan, right? Identify again. Number two could be, if you're listening to this, what were your frustrations with your practice prior to all this, and really get granular and identify it and be okay with it, right? And write it down. And from those 3 to 5 frustrations, then you can go ahead and build a plan. Is it team engagement? Was it your team's performance? And peel back what exactly needs to be put in place. And that could be, a lot of it has to do with a training aspect. I mean, we talked about remote teams, and even though prior to all this, about 43% of the United States, the US workforce, worked remotely a couple of days a week, only half of them ever got any training. So it's the reality that the training, in order for you guys to, drive hands-free as far as from your practices, you gotta double down into the training and touch base with your team. So identify where the training modules could be. Can you bring the team in, and maybe it has to be an agreed upon salary, right? So if you have a higher end hygienist, maybe you're gonna say, hey, I'd love you to come in for a day so we can work on our team manuals. And that day is gonna be more an administrative fee, right? You can go into the office and take pictures of all your tray setups, write down all your procedures. You can have each team member do a checklist. What do you do as soon as you walk in the office? And then record it all and get your training manuals and your manuals put together. So those are the tangible things that, again, if you have to do some type of new employee training later on, that you're going to have those already set up. You could do infection control videos of what you're already doing, bring your team in and doing those, not necessarily putting them out now on your Facebook page or your website, but you can, house them for later on when it is applicable, when we're going back to the new normal to help save your patients. So there's a lot of, I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but there's a lot of things that we can do. Yeah.
This is great. I mean, you could even have a plan of coming back, right? Or you could even have what's our plan to come back?
Yes.
And that's super important too.
Right. And just where are we communicating? I want to ask, are you communicating with your patients during this time? Right? And not the communication, no communication is good or bad or right or wrong, right? You want to be able to communicate, and you have to come from who you are and your brand. But look at ensuring that you're just touching base with them. Just from a human, I just wanted to reach out to you and say, hey, we're here for you if anything, if you have an emergency. Hey, we're just kind of touching base with you. So many dentists have such a relationship within their community. So what are you doing now? Not saying how amazing that we are in dentists, but just from a human to human perspective, and just sending out those emails. Or you can I have a couple of offices who actually have Zoom calls for their patients. Let's jump on and let's have this type of conversation. We're here for you. Right? So don't negate the fact that some of your patients may be feeling isolated, may not have that family network, may not have that support, and you and your team can be that for them. So that's a precious gift that we can give our patients as well.
These are such important tools because we are all trying to figure out how we can be useful. Part of what dentistry is all about is it's such a fulfilling field. Because you go out there every day and you make a difference in people's lives, and all of a sudden, and that gives you a lot of happiness, right? And all of a sudden that stopped, right?
Yes.
And we need to be with our teams more so today than ever before, to kind of remind us that we still can care for our patients, and we can become better, and let's connect with each other more, put some systems in place, put some policies in place and protocols in place, so that when we come back renewed with a new sense of purpose, a new sense of connection, a new culture potentially, that is closer, tight knit, and that's going to show, and that's going to easily, I mean, patients are going to recognize right away, right? As soon as you walk in and talk to somebody in a dental office, you know what the culture is like.
Right.
By the way, hello.
It's so true, because we think we're good actors and actresses, but we're not. So the culture is the culture. We can feel that when you walk into someone's home. When we used to be able to walk into people's homes, you could tell if anyone was fighting, right? Or, oh my gosh, there's some tension in here. I'm not feeling comfortable. The same thing is with the dental practice. So it's really important to make sure that we are having that cultural component, and with intentionality. Intentionality is really the key.
It's so amazing to have had this with you. I hope we do more of these in the future when this is over. But for people who want to contact Kristine, I think her expertise is well beyond just setting up remote teams. Obviously, as you can hear in the conversation, she talks about culture, intentionality, accountability. It really resonates with all of us, not just dentists, but as a software company,
Mhm.
the message that you have resonates with me. Any business that's trying to really put some systems in place to grow and scale,
Mhm.
you need a coach. You need a coach, period, in your life. And Kristine, you seem like a mighty one. And congratulations for what you've done to help the practices all over the place. And I'm going to leave your information out there on the screen here for people to look at and contact you. KristineBerry.com, and then they can email you at Kristine@KristineBerry.com.
Absolutely.
Anything else? How is there any other information that you want to put on the screen so that people can contact you easily?
Again, it would be Kristine@KristineBerry.com. Kristine is with a K, Kristine, and Berry is Berry.com. And any type of, no question, no thought is too small. I'm here to support you. And coaching takes many aspects. So accountability could be something as much as once a week or once a quarter or just touching base. So if you want a conversation, then I'm here to help.
Well, that's fantastic. I encourage all of you guys to contact her, look at her website, and see what coaching can do to you, not only in this time, but in the future as well. Thank you so much for this morning, and we appreciate. I know our audience will appreciate your pearls of wisdom that you gave us, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.